and welcome to the Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. I'm Bela Musitz.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Hey, Mike, today's guest on the podcast is Mark Tieszen. Mark was on the podcast back in April of 2023 in actually two episodes, episode 79 and episode 80. He was kind enough to share his experience when he ran aground and washed up on shore in his 45-foot sailboat while he was coming into a harbor at night. There were some great lessons in that one for sure. Today's episode is much happier. We discuss a trip that he made from the west coast of Florida to the Dry Tortugas. It was his fifth attempt to make this passage, and he was finally successful and had a wonderful time. Mark put together some charts and photos of his trip that he shared during our conversation. So if you're listening to this using audio only, I suggest you hit pause and go to YouTube and watch it there. You can search for Sailing the East on YouTube and it should pop up. Also, there are some podcasting apps that support video. And if you use Spotify, you can just turn video on in your Spotify app.
Agreed. And listeners, normally I don't watch podcasts on YouTube, but this one will be worth a little bit of effort if you have a chance to do it, because it's what Mark showed is really cool. But beyond that, I think listeners should listen up for three interesting points. First, this is going to be a fantastic history lesson for some of you about the Dry Tortugas, which I knew where it was and knew a little bit about it, having been to South Florida a bunch, but I got some really great, this was a great history lesson. Second, I think people will get some great insights into the power of patience and persistence in trip planning. There were some really good takeaways there for kind of the approach that Mark took to this whole experience. And then third, I think there was some interesting benefits of sailing in a group, right? Like how Mark did this passage. So that's what I think. I think listeners want to listen up for. Bela, what do you think?
Yeah, let's jump right into my conversation with Mark. Mark, welcome to the podcast again.
Well, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much. So I was just looking up, the last time you were on the podcast was back in April of 2023, actually for two episodes, episode numbers 79 and 80. And that was a wonderful episode, two episodes, because we sort of chronicled your running aground
Right.
and washing up on the beach. And all the adventures that were associated with that. But that's all behind you.
Yep.
And so if listeners, want to hear those two episodes, they're really good. A lot of good takeaways there, a lot of lessons learned that I think would be very helpful to listeners. And then last summer, we had sort of penciled in another podcast session because you were going to make a trip to the Dry Tortugas.
Correct.
And that trip didn't happen for a whole bunch of reasons. But this past winter, you made that trip. And so that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, actually just in April.
Yeah.
So it was just a month ago.
Well, you live in Florida, is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, up here in the north, April is still winter.
All right. Fair enough.
But hey, what I wanted to talk about a little bit was last summer, you tried to make this trip, or last year, I should say, you tried to make this trip, and it sort of didn't work out. Can you just sort of set that up for us a little bit, and what happened, and your thought process for turning around and not doing that trip? And there's good lessons there, because a lot of people don't turn around, and that's when they get into trouble.
So I've actually tried to make this trip 4 other times in the last 10 years.
Okay.
The first time we got about halfway there and the weather turned against us, and we had to turn around. One year we had it planned, and then Alan, my sailing buddy, got into a car accident and broke his arm the day before he was supposed to fly down to Florida. So that didn't work out. The third time was in 2020, and we made it halfway there, and COVID hit. and they closed down Key West, and I had to get back to work, so we had to turn around and get back home. So the fourth time was last April. So subsequent to that, I've now moved to Punta Gorda. In Florida. We've joined a boating club. The boating club was making this trip down to the Dry Tortugas, and we just had a wonderful trip. We there were nearly 10 boats, about half sailboats and half power boats. And we kind of skipped down the coast and made it to the Everglades, and then went to Marathon for a couple of days, and then went across to Key West for a couple of days. And then the idea was from Key West, we would go to the Dry Tortugas. Well, that whole trip, to get down to Key West took us almost 12 days. And of course, by then, any of the weather predictions that we had made had gone through the window, and the wind was just too strong. We could have it was prevailing easterly winds into the Dry Tortugas from Key West. We could have easily gotten there, but it would have been very uncomfortable. It's not a greatly protected anchorage there. Mm-hmm. And so none of us felt comfortable doing it. So we all turned back and just went back up the coast, and kind of went our separate ways then.
Yeah. So did I misspeak? You still have not made it to the Dry Tortugas?
No. That was this April. That was a month ago. We did make it. It was last April that we didn't make it.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. I got that confused. So you were describing last year's trip.
Right.
Where when you turned around and didn't make it. So I'm
on my high. Fifth time is the charm. We finally made it to the Dry Tortugas.
Yes. So that trip that you didn't make it was sort of a flotilla. There was a group of dozen boats or so. You sort of loosely stay together.
Exactly.
Was that was there somebody who was sort of organizing it and leading it and figuring out where you're going to stop every night and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, he's called the cruise captain.
Okay.
And he did give us some loose guidelines, and we call it kind of a hop on, hop off cruise. So, some of us followed the schedule and went down, but especially the power boats sometimes get bored with us sailboats, and they'll go ahead and skip ahead because they can go a lot farther in a day.
Sure.
And stay for a couple of days at a marina, and then we'll show up and stay one day there, and then we all go on. But for the most part, we stayed together pretty well, and I think there were 5 or 6 of us at Marathon on boats all together, and I think that same group went to Key West.
Nice,
there.
Nice. So yeah, I think there's a lot of for me. I find a lot of comfort, and I'm more relaxed when I'm I like to explore, but I also have this sort of I'm very conservative and I'm very cautious, particularly when I have other people on the boat. When I'm on the boat myself, I tend to be a little more. I won't use the word reckless. That's the wrong word, but I take on more risk when I'm with myself. But when I'm the captain and I'm responsible for others, I take that extremely seriously. And I think that the notion of being with other boats is a good one. So the question I have for you is one of the things that one needs to be careful about in these sort of group sails is a group think. Yeah. Where there's this pressure to continue and nobody sort of wants to speak up. How did you guys sort of make those decisions as a group of whether to proceed or not to proceed, et cetera?
Well, I'll give you one example is at one point during that trip last year, the sailboats were going to make an overnight passage from one place down to Marco Island. And Sharon and I are not big overnight sailors, and they were going to stay there for 2 days. So we just took an extra day. We sailed halfway there during the day, anchored, and then joined them the next day.
Yeah.
When we actually got to Key West and everybody started looking at the weather, it was kind of a we all I shouldn't say we all sat down because we didn't. We one boat would talk to another boat, and then those two boats would talk to a third boat, and there was kind of a murmur of well, maybe this is not the best idea. The cruise captain and myself were very gung-ho about going, and we were kind of the holdouts. But at the end, we both said, well, everybody else is saying it's probably not a good idea. Maybe it's not a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we didn't end up going.
So you didn't have like a formal meeting every day or every other day or every next leg.
No,
Yeah.
It was fairly informal. We usually had docktails on somebody's boat every night, and that typically, we talked about the cruise and what we're going to do the next day and whatnot. But to call that a formal meeting, I think would be stretching it a little.
Okay. Very good. So that was last year, a flotilla. You guys didn't make it. Sounds like you made the right decision to turn around and come back. I've never regretted a decision of turning around and coming back.
Yeah.
I never have, but I have regretted continuing. So let's talk about this year. Let's talk about April and how that went, how that got set up, etc.
So this year it was the same group that, in fact, it was the same cruise captain that was going to make the trip, but it didn't work out for a lot of the other people. So there were 4 or 5 boats that took off, but only went together, but only planned to go about a quarter of the way down. There were 2 sailboats and our boat that were committed to getting all the way to the Dry Tortugas. And what we thought was, maybe instead of working our way down to Key West and not being able to predict the weather, we should just go partway down the coast, sit there until we have a good weather window, and then just go straight across overnight from the coast to get to the Dry Tortugas, and we'd be able to predict the weather window a little bit better. So that's what we planned on doing. 2 of the sailboats made it to Marco Island. We kind of dragged our feet a little bit because I had a boat project that I hadn't quite got done yet. And they actually saw a weather window and left from Marco Island before we got there. And then we made our way down to Marco Island, and we waited for a weather window, and we took off, and we actually passed each other as we were pulling into the Dry Tortugas. Those 2 boats were leaving. So we actually saw them on the water and talked to them on the VHF and whatnot. And so when we actually got to the Dry Tortugas, none of our group was there. But
I see.
As happenstance has it, there was a reunion of Catalina 445 boats, which is the sailboat that we sail on. And I had saw something loose about that on the Facebook group.
Yeah.
And but I didn't realize that we would overlap there. But when we were there were 6 other, by the time it was done, there were 6 other Catalina 445 boats there. So these are people that I had all interacted with on Facebook, but I'd never met in person. So that was a real fun. Being able to meet them and spend some time with them. And we could all talk about our boats because we all had the same boat.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, very nice. So here again, sort of a loose flotilla, not very rigid. You can kind of check in, check out as you want from the group, etc. So approximately how many miles is that from your home port down to the Dry Tortugas?
From my home port, it is 30 hours. So 30 times 5 is what, 150, 130 miles, like that.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
but what we did was work our way down the coast to a place called Marco Island, and from there it was about 70 miles. No, I'm sorry, 90 miles to get there, because it was supposed to be an 18-hour overnight passage. Now, it turned out not to be an 18-hour overnight passage. It turned out longer than that, but that was the plan.
Got it. Got it. So I'm just looking at a map here, and it looks like the closest other piece of land would be Key West. Is
Right,
that?
right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you can
So,
kind of, if you're coming from that side of Florida, you can kind of go down the Key West chain,
right.
and then from Key West over to the Dry Tortugas. It looks like that you could do in a day.
Yeah, it's about a 12-hour trip for
Yeah.
for a sailboat. And that
Yeah.
is the recommended course, is to go to the Key West to the Dry Tortugas, and then if you're going back to the west coast of Florida from the Dry Tortugas overnight to the west coast, because that's the prevailing wind pattern,
Yeah.
and you get pretty good winds that way. But the problem with that is that it takes you a while to get to the Key West, and then by the time you're in Key West, then you have to wait for a weather window to get there. So we were trying to fool that. We were trying to get there and then deal with the weather and getting home after that.
Yeah. Yeah. Very nice. So I've never been there. So what's there to see? What are the sights? What pulls you to go there?
Yeah, so the Dry Tortugas is a series of 7 islands that are that are made of coral and sand, and they are at the westernmost tip of the Florida reef system. So all the way from Key West out to the Dry Tortugas, there is a reef system there. So if you're in the Atlantic Ocean and you're trying to get up to the west coast of Florida, you can't just cut in there in a big ship.
Oh,
You have to go all the way around the Dry Tortugas. Then it's an open shot there. So the Dry Tortugas became a very popular navigation, and became a very popular stop for sailors. Was first discovered by Ponce de Leon, and I got it written down here, in 1513. And it was named Las Tortugas, which is the turtles. And shortly after that, it started to show up on the maps as the Dry Tortugas, because there's no fresh water there. And so people wanted to make sure that people who were stopping there knew that they couldn't resupply with.
So the dry, it means water, not alcohol.
Right, exactly. In our modern vernacular, you start to think about other things rather than that. And because of the way the currents are, and how that reef is, it actually became a very strategic location there, a military strategic location. And during the Civil War, the Union forces built a fort there. And let me see, they started building that in 1846, named Fort Jefferson, after Thomas Jefferson. And since they had a military presence there, they were actually able to control supply routes to the south. So people that were trying to get supplies from the Atlantic Ocean to the west coast of the United States there had to go past the Dry Tortugas. And the fort was quite imposing, and they made a big impact on the South's ability to get war materials there. So the fort is huge. It's the key it sits on is 16 acres. It's called Garden Key, and the fort itself takes up 10 of those acres. So it's
Wow.
a huge fort. In fact, it is the third largest seacoast fort ever built in the United States. It went through 30 years of construction from 1846, but they never actually finished it. Went through a variety of different problems because it's so remote, because they had to get supplies from other places, because of disease, especially yellow fever there. They had a lot of challenges there. But the reason that they made it so large was that their idea is that once they could get it fully stocked, the idea is that they could have enough soldiers and supplies there to survive a year-long siege.
Wow.
And hold out against forces. Now they never had to do that. They in fact, it was only in one kind of quasi battle right at the beginning of the Civil War, where the South decided that they were going, after the North had built this fort or started building this fort, the South decided that they were going to take it over. And the Northern artillery troops had arrived the day before. And this South flotilla showed up, and they bluffed them, saying, "We're here. We have all this artillery. There's no way that you're ever going to get close to us." And they believed it, and they went away. Well, what the South didn't know is that they didn't have any ammunition. They had showed up with the guns and the soldiers, but they had no ammunition.
Yeah.
That was as close as the fort came to a battle. It also became very important in the Spanish-American War, not so much as a military strategic location, but as a refueling station. So now the ships, were all powered by coal. And so they built on Fort Jefferson these two huge coaling stations so that the American ships could come in, get refueled. They also had a huge distillery plant that apparently could put out 60,000 gallons of fresh water a day, because obviously the steam engines needed water and
exactly.
coal. And so it was an important refueling station there. After the Spanish-American War, the naval technology kind of outstripped the Dry Tortugas. Now ships were much more independent, and guns were much longer range. And so the Dry Tortugas kind of lost its or I should say Fort Jefferson kind of lost its military strategic sense.
Yeah.
And then there was a big hurricane, which I think was in like 1910, and destroyed a bunch of the fort. And by 1912, the military abandoned it, said, this is no longer cost effective for us. And then it became a federal national park, and that's what it is now. So there are rangers there that live there. And of course, they now have the modern conveniences of air conditioning and satellite TV and that kind of stuff. They apparently live there on a 10-day rotating schedule. They're there for 10 days and then they go off on the island. Although there are a couple of them that live there full time. And it's just a very historic site there. Sharon and I spent 2 afternoons just walking around the fort, they have guided tours. We took a tour one day and then we walked around the fort. The other historical significance of Fort Jefferson is that during the Civil War, they housed federal prisoners there. So the most famous prisoner that was there was Dr. Samuel Mudd. You remember who Dr. Samuel Mudd was?
I do not. I was not a strong history student. I'm a math and science guy.
Yeah. Me neither. But you go to Fort Jefferson and you learn about Dr. Samuel Mudd. So he is the physician who set John Wilkes Booth's leg. Remember, after John Wilkes Booth shot Lincoln, he fell off the stage. He broke his leg. He found Samuel Mudd, and Dr. Mudd set his leg. Now, it was very unclear in history whether Mudd was part of the conspiracy or whether he just contributed to it by treating this person, but he got sentenced to federal prison. And so he was there at the Dry Tortugas for 4 years, I think from 1865 through 1869. And a lot of the history, a lot of the descriptions that we have about Fort Jefferson are based on his writings. He would write very detailed letters to his family at home, and they saved all of those. And he described life there and the fort and whatnot. Apparently, he tried to escape several times by sneaking on to another ship and tried to leave. But he also, during the yellow fever epidemic, the physician at the fort actually died, and Samuel Mudd took over the hospital. And he did, treated all these soldiers and whatnot with the yellow fever. He was eventually pardoned, as was the 4 other conspiracies there. And in 1869, and I don't know exactly when they closed the prison, but obviously it doesn't hold prisoners now. For us going there now, there's all kinds of things to do there. First of all, how do you get there? So you can only get there by boat or seaplane. So you can get there by your own boat, and there are several different anchorages there that you can anchor in. There is a ferry, the Yankee Freedom, it's called, that goes to the Dry Tortugas every day for day trips. And there's also a seaplane that flies in there, which is actually very interesting because the seaplane lands in the anchorage. It lands right down the canal or the channel there, and it goes 3 or 4 times a day. Drop off people, pick people up, and whatnot. So you can explore the fort. We did that. There are some great snorkeling places. Sharon and I did a lot of snorkeling. The coaling stations were big docks that were built out from the side of the fort. Now the docks are gone, but the pilings are still there, and there's some great snorkeling around those pilings. There's also very good scuba diving there, and very good wreck dives there, because there's over 100 wooden ships that have shipwrecked there over the centuries, especially before they got the first lighthouse up, because there's a reef system there, and there's open water to the what would it be, to the east, but if you're trying to cut across there, they would often hit the reef. It's a great birding place. There's right off of Garden Key, there's a place called Bush Key, where there's just thousands of birds of different varieties, and some birds that only nest in that area. And so every day, especially on the day trip people, we would see people with these cameras, with these big ass lenses and binoculars, and they were actually coming to watch the birds. And you can walk along Bush Key. You can walk along the beach. You can't actually go into the mangroves, but you can walk along the beach. The other interesting thing that I found about the birds, I mean, we've anchored outside several bird sanctuaries over the years, and most of the time the birds at sunset go to sleep and quiet down. The birds at Dry Tortugas don't do that. They cackle all night long. So when you would get up in the middle of the night, the birds would be chirping just as loud as they were
Oh,
during
wow.
the day. I don't understand that. There's good fishing there. Now you can't fish in the park itself, but the motorboats would only take 15, 20 minutes to get out to a good fishing spot. So we would see big motorboats that would, come into the anchorage late afternoon, leave in the morning, come back, and they had obviously been out fishing and whatnot. So there's a lot to do there. We stayed there 4 full days, and we easily could have stayed longer.
Wow. Now, are there any like marinas and services there, fuel, etc.?
Nothing. So that's the other thing you have to know is that there are no services there. You can't get fresh water. You can't get fuel. You can't get food. There is no cell service there. But the ranger station does post the weather report every day on a bulletin board, and they do have free Wi-Fi. So if you can go to the ranger station, go up on the island, get there and use your phone and get a weather report and do that kind of stuff. There is a snack shop on the ferry that comes every day. So you can go there, you're welcome to go up on the ferry and buy snacks, but they're not provisioning, right?
Yes.
You can't buy chicken or rice or anything like that. The other thing I didn't mention is that there are campsites there. Now, they're very basic campsites, but apparently they're very popular. You have to reserve them quite far in advance. And most of these people come on the ferry on one day, do their camping, and then go back on the ferry whenever they are ready to leave. And there are outhouses there for the campers to use, but that's about the only facility there that's available.
Right. So it's interesting, right? It's pretty easy to get to, even though it took you 5 times. I mean,
right.
from a distance perspective, it's pretty easy to get to. It's a national park. There's rangers that live there, but there's no services there.
Right.
So it's this interesting, that's kind of rare. Most of the times, places that are relatively easy to get to have marinas and all this other infrastructure and stuff. So you really take some planning here, and you really have to be self-sufficient with your safety buffer of time.
Absolutely.
Because you got to wait for a weather window sometimes, as we all know. So that's interesting. So it really takes some planning to go there.
So, water is a big thing. You need to make sure that you have enough water for yourself, and fuel for the motorboats. I know when we were the last trip last year, one of the motorboats that was with us in Key West knew that he couldn't make the trip because he would run out of fuel on the way back, and he couldn't refuel there. So it's not every boat that can get there.
Yeah. Well, that sounds really, really interesting. So I think you said you had some maps and some other things that maybe we can share a screen here and we can try that and see how it works. And if they don't work out great, maybe you can send those to me and I'll splice them into the video for those people looking on a video screen or watching this in video. So let's see if we can try this. That looks very good here. I can see that quite well.
Good. See if I can get rid of that there. So you can see here's the west coast of Florida. This is the Everglades here.
Yeah.
This is the Key West chain. And then this is approximately 70 miles from
Okay.
Key West to the Dry Tortugas. And that reef system sits all in here there. So if you're coming from the Atlantic Ocean down here and are trying to get up here, you've got to go all the way around the Dry Tortugas and then make your way up. That's what made the Dry Tortugas a strategic location there. So this
very nice.
we had 4 souls on our boat. This is me, the captain. This is the admiral doing what admirals do. She's enjoying an adult beverage as I think we're sitting at anchorage there. And these are our other 2 crew members. So
okay.
This was the first trip that we took. This was the longest trip that we took our cats on. They'd been on the boat a couple of other times on, 2 to 3 day trips, but this is the first time that they took that. So that's the black and white cat there is Mr. Darcy. And the calico here is Phoenix. And they actually did amazingly well. We were a little nervous about how they would do. But you know what? It was nice and warm in the cabin whenever we were sailing, and they pretty much just slept all day. So they did very well.
Excellent.
This is day number 1. So this is where we live up here in Punta Gorda. And this is Charlotte Harbor. So this leg of Charlotte Harbor is about 8 miles long and 4 miles across. And this leg down here is about 7 miles across and 3 miles across. So it's very nice sailing place. We go out there and day sail in Charlotte Harbor all the time. This particular day, we went into a marina over here, Burnt Storm Marina, to refuel, and then made it down here to one of our favorite anchorages. So now I don't want to hear anything from you and Mike in the post comment sections about my very professional graphics. So for those of you who are just listening to the podcast, I have a map up and I have some very crudely drawn letters to try to point things out. So this is the base of Charlotte Harbor. This is B is Boca Grande Pass. This is the Gulf of Mexico out here. A is the ICW that goes north through Inglewood up to Venice, Florida, and other points north up to Sarasota. And C here is the ICW going south, and that'll take you all the way to Fort Myers. This is one of our favorite anchorages. This is Pelican Bay. It is on the key there is called Cayo Costa. It is a Florida state park, and it is just a great day trip. We go, or a weekend trip.
Yes.
We go down there, spend the weekend. There's a manatee hole there, and you can always find some manatees. There's kayaking there. There are walking trails on Cayo Costa. There are campsites on Cayo Costa, but I don't think they're open yet. It got hit pretty hard by Hurricane Ian, and they haven't fully recovered from that yet. This is day number 2. So we left from Pelican Bay, sailed up across Boca Grande Pass, through Boca Grande Channel, down the outside to a Redfish Pass, and we were able to sail that way. But when we got to Redfish Pass, the wind was starting to pick up and the waves were starting to pick up. So we bailed inside and then took the ICW down all the way down here to Fort Myers. So we could have gone the ICW the entire way,
Yes.
from here down, but we're sailors. We like to sail. So we were able to sail half the day and then had to motor the other half through there.
Nice. Nice.
So this is a picture of South Seas resort. This is a resort right off of Redfish Pass, which is on the northern tip of Captiva. This is a very nice resort. We like this very much. I took some sailing courses there from the Colgart sailing school. It got hit very hard by Hurricane Ian as well, and it is just slowly recovering there. But you can see that the main building's been rebuilt, and there's some people out there by the pool. This is the bridge. So now we're all the way down to the southern part of the ICW in that area. And this is the bridge that goes across from Fort Myers to Sanibel. This is that same bridge at night with a very nice sunset. And this is from our anchorage looking back at the bridge. And this is Fort Myers over here. And this is Sanibel over here. So this is one of our favorite anchorages down in that area. Now in that area, this is actually Fort Myers Beach. There are several protected anchorages inside here, and there's a wide variety of marinas there as well. So you have lots of choices if you're going to make it that way. So this is kind of how it works. This is Fort Myers. There's a bridge that goes across to Sanibel, and I think we'll see a better picture of this later. And then you drive up Sanibel, and Captiva is up here. So this was just a nice straight sail down the coast, and our goal was to get to Marco Island. This is a more detailed picture of the entrance into Marco Island. Very broad, very easy entrance to get into. Again, multiple marinas, multiple places to anchor, and we typically go to what's called Factory Bay, which is over here, and then Rose Marina is where we left. So this is the captain and the admiral here enjoying lunch at Rose Marina on the day that we got there.
Very nice.
This is a picture of our boat, Midwinter Night's Dream. It's at anchor there in Factory Bay. Marco Island was our jump off point for where we were going to take the trip across from Marco Island up here and sail across to the Dry Tortugas. We knew that trip was going to take us about 18 hours. So our plan was to leave late in the afternoon and sail overnight and arrive to the Dry Tortugas at the late morning, so that we had plenty of daylight, especially since we had never been there before.
Yes.
So as we were watching the weather, we knew we were going to have a good wind, a nice beam reach the entire way down. The prevailing winds are east from Key West to, but we had a nice wind here that was going to give us a beam reach. We were a little bit nervous about the waves, but the wave prediction was 3 to 4 feet with an occasional 5 feet. We thought, we can do that. That's not too bad. We've done that before. Well, the wind stayed on point the entire time, but the waves they lied about. So it was more like 4 to 6 foot waves, and they weren't occasional. They were very frequent 6 to 8 foot waves, and they were hitting us from 3 different directions.
Oh gosh.
So it was a very uncomfortable trip. It was the literal washing machine as you were driving down. We were able to sail. We left about 3:30 in the afternoon. I put the sails up right away. We sailed until about 2 a.m. At 2 a.m., there looked like there was a storm coming. We could see the lightning there. Now, We had no, yeah, so we're out here someplace, maybe 2/3 of the way across at this point. We had no cell service, and I do have Starlink on the boat, but the Starlink subscription I have this Starlink considers open ocean, so I wasn't getting any Starlink. So it was kind of a visual reckoning, and it looked like that storm was getting close to us. So we took the sails down to make sure that we didn't have to sail through a squall, and motored the rest of the way. Well, motoring was actually even more uncomfortable than sailing, and we had to slow down to about 3 knots just to make it comfortable for us. Now, it turns out that that storm never caught up with us, but we motored the rest of the way into the Dry Tortugas, and the trip ended up taking us 24 hours instead of the 18 hours that we had planned. So the only redeeming part of the whole passage over was from about 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. we got visited by a school of dolphins that were chasing a school of flying fish. So the dolphins were eating the flying fish. They were playing in our bow wake. We could see them up and turn over. You know, they'd flip over and swim back upside down. You could see their white belly. And this goes on for about 2 hours. It had to be at least 100 dolphins, if not more.
Wow.
The flying fish kept landing on the boat. So we couldn't see them land on the boat, but that we could hear them on the front deck, and we have a hard Dodger, and so we could hear them bounce off the hard Dodger. And at one point, one even hit me in the shoulder, just kind of glanced off of me, and bounced back into the water. It didn't hurt at all, but it sure scared the bejeebies out of me.
Yes.
So by the following morning, we could find the remnants of some of these flying fish on the deck that never made it back into the water. Unfortunately, none of our pictures or videos of this whole event came out. We weren't able to get anything. So I have evidence of dead fish, but I have no other photographic evidence to support my claims.
Yeah, it is amazing. There have been many times where you wake up in the morning and you find these flying fish on deck.
Right.
And in my limited experience, most of the time they've been, not much bigger than a sardine. They've been pretty small.
Right. And that's the ones we have those variety in our canal right outside the house here, and they're that size. But these, you can see, these are actually fairly big fish here. They're like 8 inches long there.
Yeah. Can you share your screen again and put that picture?
Oh, I thought I was. Here we go. How's that?
Yep. Perfect. Oh, those are big.
Yeah. Yeah, those are much bigger flying fish than I remember seeing.
Yeah.
So the admiral decided that was the captain's job to get rid of the flying fish off the deck. So I had to throw the fish back into the sea.
Yes.
Now I think
very good.
I think I mentioned that we passed our boating group as we came in, and here's them, one of the boats. We're about an hour away from the Dry Tortugas, and they're on their way home, and we're on our way back down.
Very nice.
This is the kind of the map view of coming into the Dry Tortugas. So we came in up from the north here in those, kind of orange hash lines there. That's the beginning of the park, of the national sanctuary. And then our goal is to get down here. One thing that I found interesting is almost to the minute that we crossed the border into the national park, Starlink started working again. So all of a sudden I got these 6 texts that people had been sending me overnight that had never got to me. So Starlink's able to really, hone down on where they allow you to use your service, depending on what subscription that you have.
Yeah, the last spring, right around this time when I was coming up from southern Georgia up to East Coast with Mike on his boat, one afternoon we were outside, we're not in the ICW, and all of a sudden Starlink stopped working.
Uh-huh.
And we had enjoyed it, like we had always had connectivity, and then he starts, what's going on, we're trying to figure out what's going on, and Mike is not the technical guy, his
Okay.
wife is, and she was not along. so we don't have any cell service, so we go back in a little closer to shore to get cell service. And it turns out they have what we learned was, I think it's a 12-mile limit.
Okay.
So if you're 12 miles, if you have the non-ocean version plan,
Right.
12 miles, they cut you off.
Yeah.
And so the rest of the trip, we stayed within 12 miles of shore and everything was okay.
Right.
But yeah, they are very good at that.
Yeah. And they have good coverage over the ocean. You just have to pay quite a bit more
That's right.
for it.
That's right.
To,
Just a different
to
plan.
get it. So yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
but the nice thing about Starlink is they will let you like we could have just upgraded our subscription for a month and then
Yes.
degraded it back down. So it's
That's
not
right.
like you have to sign up for 6 months or a year or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Yep. And the price of that keeps coming down. And, I'm to the point, this is a little bit of a sidebar, but I'm to the point of thinking about getting it here at home, because what I pay for I pay like $80 a month to be connected to the internet. That's all I get. Just an internet connection for $80 a month.
Uh-huh.
And Starlink, the home based stuff is starting to get down into that price range.
Yeah. I pay $50 a month for 100 gigs.
Yeah.
Which I think is a pretty good deal.
Yeah. Anyway, back to the trip.
So once we got down closer, this is another map picture of the Dry Tortugas, and you see that there's a very gentle pathway channel in here. This is Garden Key, and this is the actual fort there. This blue water here is the moat that's around the fort. This is Bush Key. That's where all the birds are. And this is the main anchorage. And it's big. At the height when we were there were probably 20 boats in this anchorage, and we didn't feel crowded at all.
Mm-hmm.
The big ferry comes in on this same route, but so does the seaplane. So the seaplane lands right along this strip, and they have a little dock right over here. So they are fearless. So this is a picture of Fort Jefferson as we were driving in. It's an all brick and mortar kind of a fort. And all those little holes there are all places where they can put cannons. So it's a very intimidating kind of a fort. Now, I don't think in the history of Fort Jefferson that they ever had enough cannons there to fill all those holes. But as a ship approaching that, I don't think you could tell that. I don't think you could tell that there weren't cannons there.
Right. No one was taking cell phone pictures to prove you wrong.
Right. And zooming in on
it. I think about a fort like that, and all of those stones or whatever it's made out of, everything had to be imported.
Right.
It came over on ships, and people unloaded it on their backs. And I mean, and they had no water there. So, I mean, it's just, I just think about those kind of projects. And to me, it's like mind boggling the amount of labor, physical labor that goes into something like that. It's remarkable.
And so you can, the picture I have up now is the front gate of Fort Jefferson. And you can see the different discoloration of the bricks as the fort goes up. And those are all just bricks sourced from other places. The top layer here, those are all
Huh.
bricks from Maine.
Oh, interesting.
And that's why it has that more reddish color than some of the other bricks.
Huh. That's really, yeah. I mean, now they had to get the bricks all the way down there from Maine. It's
right,
like,
right.
couldn't you pick a closer place to get bricks from?
So this is the front gate. This is called the Sally Port. And in fact, this is the only gate into the Dry Tortugas. And you can see you have to cross a moat here. During its heyday, there was a large drawbridge here. And then this alleyway, it's hard to see in there, but it's about 6 to 8 feet long. And there are little slots on each side of it for men to stand with rifles. So even if you made it through this and got the drawbridge down, they would just shoot you as you walk through this little killing area here. So it was a very well protected fort.
Wow.
This is a picture of the structure inside the alleyways here. And you can see the archways there and how wide it actually is. This is a picture of the parade grounds. So this is the inside of the fort. This large dome structure here is a magazine where they used to store gunpowder. Another picture of the parade grounds. Here is the lighthouse.
Lighthouse, yeah.
Yeah, it's actually not functional now, but it looks nice. It looks fairly new, but the light doesn't work.
Yeah.
Here you can see a tourist on top of Fort Jefferson there. So you can walk along the bottom level, the second level, and you can get up to the top and walk along the third level there. And we have some pictures here. There's some great views from up there. Another picture of Fort Jefferson and the parade grounds from on top. I'm now standing on top of Fort Jefferson. So here's the moat. So this is the wall of Fort Jefferson, and then the moat, and then the moat wall. And that was a defensive position, so that boarders couldn't get that close. But it was also very important for weather protection for the actual fort, so that the waves broke on this moat wall instead of breaking on the actual fort. And you can see in this picture where the moat wall has broken down. And there's a lot of activity at Fort Jefferson. This is what they're reconstructing, the breaks in the moat wall. And they're not necessarily doing that for historical accuracy. They're doing that to protect the fort so that waves don't get through there and start damaging the actual fort. In this particular picture, you can see people swimming out here. There's some snorkeling there. In the distance of this picture, you can see the remnants of the South Coaling dock, which is those pilings that you can see in the different distance, and there's good snorkeling there. This is from the top looking out into the anchorage, and you can see all the birds in the air. This is Bush Key here, and those birds are just constantly circling, constantly chattering. It's a little hard.
That looks like the ferry boat at the dock there.
Yes. So that's the Yankee Freedom. That is the ferry boat, and we'll get a better picture of that in a minute. This is us right here at Anchorage. It's a little hard to tell who we
So
are. But
are there mooring balls there, or are you anchored?
no, you anchor. There are no mooring balls. There are apparently mooring balls out at some of the dive and snorkel sites outside of Fort Jefferson.
Yeah.
But they're more dinghy-sized mooring balls than they are big boat mooring balls.
Yes.
This is one of the cannons that is still there. This is a 16-inch Rodman cannon. I have no idea what that
Wow.
means, but that's what the plaque said. And you can see it. It sits on these metal rails there, and that's how they pivoted and aimed the gun.
Yeah.
And this was all done manually. They had to push this thing around, and I don't know how much this weighs, but it's huge. It's all cast iron, and I'm sure it's heavy.
Yeah. Gosh. And they had to get it there.
Yeah, I don't know how they got it up there. Yeah. This is a little more modern part of the Fort Jefferson's history. This is what's called a chug boat, and it is one of the refugee boats from Cuba. So Cuba is about 90 miles away from Fort Jefferson, and refugees would try to make that trip in boats like this. And it was called a chug boat because they used car or truck engines to power the prop there that you can see in this picture. And they kind of made this chug chug sound as they were coming across.
Huh. Interesting.
Here is the cat crew taking another nap. This is Phoenix nestled up in her shoe here.
Yeah.
This is Mr. Darcy hanging out on the floor. I think they liked the floor. We often found them on the floor and not on the rugs because it was a little bit cooler. The floor was a little bit cooler because it did get kind of hot down there. And cats like hot, but they don't like it too hot.
Right.
So this is a picture of the dinghy beach on Fort Jefferson there. And you can see this sign here that is where the seaplanes are. So the dinghy beach, and here's a picture of a dinghy and then the seaplane right next to it. So that seaplane comes in there, backs in, and the dinghies just come in on the other side of it.
Wow.
And then here's a better picture of the Yankee Freedom, the large ferry boat. And it came every day, and there were 100 to 200 people on the ferry boat every day that we were there.
And that comes from Key West?
That comes from Key West, yes.
Yeah.
The other thing that we enjoyed there was the wildlife. So there were the birds that you saw frequently, but we also saw a lot of fish. Now, is grouper a popular eating fish up where you are, Bailiff?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's not a lot of restaurants that have it, but you go to a seafood specific restaurant and there's a chance they'll have it.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't believe it's local to the waters up north, but I'm not
Yeah.
a big saltwater fisherman. Yeah.
So you can't go to any place that serves food in Florida and not be able to get grouper. Grouper is very popular down here. And this is a picture of a grouper. It is a much bigger fish than you give it credit for. It's huge there. And this water is very clear. We're in about 12 feet of water there, and you can see how easy it is to see the bottom. And this grouper just came up and kind of played around our stern and actually just hung out underneath the stern for about a half hour. I don't exactly know what it was doing under there, but we could see its tail.
Huh.
And then this is a little harder to see, but this is a shark And again, this is in 12 to 15 foot of water, and you can see how clear the bottom is, and
Yeah.
how well you can see that shark. One of the things that we did is a lot of snorkeling, and I took a lot of underwater pictures when we were snorkeling. So you can see here, this is an old anchor, an old fisherman's anchor that is leaned up against the moat wall underwater. A wide variety of fish. I like snorkeling, but I don't know my fish that well, so I don't exactly know what these are, but
Yeah.
there are all kinds. I swam through this school of fish, or the school of fish swam through me, which is really more. These tigers.
Those are some great pictures. So remind me, how many days were you there for?
We were there for 4 days,
Okay.
4 full days.
And your trip back, how did the trip back go?
So the trip back went well. Here's a picture of some bait fish. Here's sunset at the coaling docks. So these are these pylons where there used to be a dock out here, and
Yes.
that's where the ships would come in, and that's where some great snorkeling is. Another sunset picture. This
Beautiful.
is they call it the cat's head, and this is one of the places where a cannon would sit, but it's the way it sits on there, it looks like a cat's head. You can see the little head and the little ears there. So the trip home, we decided to do the trip home instead. We were going to go to Key West. Instead of going straight back to the West Coast, we were going to go to Key West, and we decided to do that trip in 2 days. And so we stopped at the Marquesas Key, which is about 2/3 of the way there. So this is our route leaving the Dry Tortugas. We came in up here from the north. Now we're leaving from the east. This is a picture of the sailboats that were still in the anchorage when we were leaving. This is a very straight shot from the Dry Tortugas to the Marquesas, not to be confused by the Marquesas in the South Pacific. These are the Marquesas in Florida. The map, the nautical map going from the Dry Tortugas back to Key West is kind of intimidating, because it has all kinds of things on there. All these circles with the crosses in it, those are wrecks. And it has places, there's a big area in here called the quicksands, but it's actually a very easy trip across there. It is deep enough. None of these wrecks break they're all well underwater. We never had any concerns about hitting anything. This wreck still sticks out of the water, but it's well marked and easy to get around. So here is the crew again up on a deck. And after the first half of the trip, they actually started to come out into the cockpit. They got a little bit more comfortable with the boat, and they would come up. We would put these little life jackets on them and hook a tether to them just in case they got too rambunctious. And they didn't necessarily like the life jackets, but they liked being up on the deck. And there's Phoenix in her life jacket. As we were going to the Marquesas, we caught a seaplane. And so here's a picture of the seaplane flying over the open ocean, going back to the Dry Tortugas. Here's a picture of the Yankee Freedom, the ferry going across the ocean back to the Dry Tortugas. And this is the Marquesas Key. So I now have a picture of the Marquesas Key map up. They call it an atoll. An atoll is a circle of land with a harbor in the middle, with a lagoon in the middle. Now, most atolls are defined in the South Pacific, and they're formed by coral reefs or by volcanoes. This is all mangrove here. That's
Oh,
what
okay.
formed this. So I think if you're a purist, you can't actually call this an atoll, but that's what people call it in Florida. Very shallow along the edges here, and you can anchor any place along here. So the trick is you just figure out where the wind is going to come up from the south from that night, and you just anchor on the opposite side. So where this little anchor spot here, this is where we anchored the night we were there. And we'll actually go back to the Marquesas because there are lots of areas there to explore.
Nice.
Here's a picture from our anchorage. You can dinghy into the lagoon in the Marquesas, and there's lots of little places that you can go in there. Here's the picture of the mangroves. Here's a picture of the moon over the Marquesas. Another sunset picture across the ocean. The next day, we went into Key West. So this is the Marquesas here. This is another collection of islands called the Boca Grande Islands. Let's see, here's another picture of the cats sleeping in the deck. This is a collection of several keys here. I don't know much about this, but it looked interesting to go to explore. So you come in to get, now I have a picture of the map coming into Key West. And you come in here, and this is the main shipping channel for Key West. So there's lots of boat traffic in there, but it's fairly wide. It's fairly easy to get across. And this is the municipal wharf. This is where the big cruise ships hang out there. And then this is where all the marinas are. This is a picture of Key West from the water. This is a picture of Mallory Square. Mallory Square is the place where all the nightlife is at night. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Oh, I guess I did. This is the anchorage or the marinas here, and all of these places along here are separate marinas. So we were at the Galleon, which is this marina here. We stayed there for 2 days. We shopped, we took showers, we did laundry, we took a trip to the Publix to restock, refilled the boat with water, did all kinds of things. Now, my wife is a real foodie. Are you guys foodies, Bela?
Not really. No.
So this is a restaurant that we went to one night called the Four Flamingos, and it is run by a chef whose name, if you're a foodie, you'll recognize his name. His name is Richard Blaze. And I'm not a foodie, but I kind of get dragged along to these places. So we went to the Four Flamingos restaurant, which is a Michelin star kind of restaurant, and had a very good meal. This is our appetizer as we were sitting there. This is the sunset from the Four Flamingos. This is a picture of all the boats at Galleon Marina at night. So
what were the dockage prices down there?
It's about $250 to $300 a night for us.
Okay. Yeah, and you're a 45-foot
Right.
boat. Yep.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's the prices are pretty consistent with all of those in all those marinas. Quite a bit more than we pay than we're used to paying up on the West Coast. And I'll have to be honest with you, it's all location. I would not classify any of these marinas as a 4-star marinas. The docks are well maintained, and they're very tight. They're hard to get in and out of. But the facilities that you have access to, the bathrooms and the laundry room and those kind of things, are not what I would consider 4-star.
Yeah.
But you're paying for the location. You're paying for
Yes.
being in Key West.
Yeah. Yeah, it is remarkable, having done the East Coast several times on the ICW and outside, it is remarkable how prices vary and
Is it?
and how amenities vary. And,
Uh-huh.
and the highest price doesn't always mean the nicest amenities.
Right.
As a matter of fact, sometimes it's just the opposite.
Right. So this is our trip home. Now we've left our marina. There's another map picture here. We've left the Galleon Marina. We go up the northwest channel here, and then into the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah.
Here's one of the big cruise ships that we passed that was docked there. And the shot back to the west coast is just straight across here. And we had a pretty unremarkable trip. Often we went to a place called Indian Key, which is a little secluded anchorage up here in the Everglades. Sometimes we go to a place called Little Shark River, which is a little place down here. But it's a long trip. I think it took us about 16 hours. We left around 8 o'clock in the morning, and we were putting the anchor down in Indian Key at midnight.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to skip those pictures. This is Indian Key here. This is another map picture, and this is all the Everglades National Park here. And you can see all these scattered anchorages around there. And this is a picture of what the anchorages actually look like. It's all mangrove bordered. Very nice anchorage, very well protected. We got a fair amount of flies when we were there, but other than that, it's usually, and they were just the annoying flies. They weren't biting flies, but they were still very annoying. So pictures there. A trip from home. We left from Indian Key. We sailed back up to Marco Island. So this is Cape Romano here, and there's a fair amount of shoaling out there. So you have to go fairly far out here, around the corner, and then up to Marco Island. Marco Island's where we stayed on the way down. Although this time we didn't anchor, we actually went into a marina at Marco Island at Rose Marina. And some of our friends from Cape Coral drove down and took us out to dinner that night. So we had a nice dinner. It was about a 45-minute drive for them. That was a nice treat. The next day, we sailed them back up from Marco Island to Fort Myers Beach. This is another map picture of that trip. Very unremarkable trip. The next day, our goal was to get back up to Cabbage Key, which is very near that Pelican Bay, Cayo Costo that we had been before. We were able to sail on the outside now. So instead of going on the inside for the first half, we went on the outside and we sailed around Sanibel. So again, another map picture here. This is Fort Myers. There's a bridge that goes over to a Sanibel, and then you can drive up Sanibel, and then these are the Captiva Islands up here. We sailed up to Redfish Pass, came in Redfish Pass, got on the ICW, and then went up the ICW to Cabbage Key. Cabbage Key is an island. It's about 4 miles south of Charlotte Harbor. Well developed. It has a very nice restaurant there. It has a small marina. There are cabins that you can rent there. All the cabins come with their own boat slips, so you can come down there with your boat, stay in the cabin, and still have a slip for your boat. Now, do you know the most famous thing that Cabbage Key is famous for?
No, I don't.
Are you a Jimmy Buffett fan?
I am a Jimmy Buffett fan. May he rest in peace.
May he rest in peace. Obviously his most famous song is Margaritaville, but one of his other top 10 songs is The Best Cheeseburger in Paradise.
Yes.
And it is written about the restaurant at Cabbage Key.
Ah.
Jimmy Buffett was apparently he was a very big sailor. He had a 60-foot something or another. I don't know what kind of boat it was, and he visited Cabbage Key quite often. And he wrote about the cheeseburger at Cabbage Key.
Oh, very nice.
So we anchored there. We took the dinghy into Cabbage Key, had a very nice meal that day. And then the next day was just getting home. Cabbage. There's another picture here of Cabbage Key. Cabbage Key is one of those places where you write on a dollar bill and then you tape it to the wall.
Right.
So this is a picture of all these random dollar bills on the wall. This is Sharon and I enjoying our meal at Cabbage Key. This is our trip home up to Charlotte Harbor, very uneventful.
Yeah.
So this is kind of our summary. Midwinter Night's Dream to the Dry Tortugas. We were there from April 20, or the trip was from April 20th through May 7th. So a total of 18 days, 11 of which were actually traveling days. We were either sailing or motoring. We only spent 3 nights at marinas, and otherwise we anchored out for 13 nights. We traveled a total of 480 nautical miles, and we sailed about a third of the time. That's a little low for us. We like to sail more than that. We like to sail closer to 50% of the time, but the weather just didn't cooperate. We sailed for about 18%, and then we had to motor when we were traveling the other 36%. So that's kind of our trip in a long nutshell.
Yeah, Mark, thank you so much for putting together this sort of travel vlog, if you will, with pictures and a wonderful story. For those of you who are watching the video version of this, either on YouTube or on some other podcasting app, this is great. And for those of you who are not watching it, I'm sorry. You just have to kind of get it from the words. But some great pictures, a really well put together story, and it sounds like just a wonderful trip. This is why people sail. This is exactly why people sail.
It was. We really enjoyed ourselves. And we'll definitely try it again.
Yeah, that's super. That's super. Have you ever thought about venturing up the East Coast of the United States?
Yes and no. We've talked about it. Our children actually live in Maine. They live in Old Town, Maine, and we have 2 grandchildren up there. So we've talked about it, but it is just so much easier to get in the plane and land there, and then turn around and come back rather than the month or longer that it takes.
It'll take a while to get to Maine, but
there.
I'm a big fan of that. And one of the beautiful things about the East Coast, and I think the Gulf is similar, is that if you want to go outside, you can go outside. If you want to go inside, you can go inside.
Right.
And you can go outside for half a day, and in most places come back in. And that's to me is really, again, back to my low tolerance for risk. It's very comforting to know that, and usually the weather forecast for the next 48 hours is pretty darn good.
Yeah.
So anyway, if you think about doing that sometime, let me know, and I can give you some key spots to stop, even better yet, if you want a crew member, you can probably twist my arm.
There you go. The Coast of Florida is very similar to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
There's lots of places to sail, 4 or 5 hours, 8 hours away. There's lots of places where you can motor on the inside of the ICW if it's too rough on the outside, or you can sail in the Gulf on the outside. So
Yeah, it's really nice.
It is very similar.
Yeah. Hey, Mark, thank you so much for doing this. This has been a great episode, and it was wonderful to chat with you again and catch up on your trip. You have what's planned for this coming sailing season for you guys?
So it gets too hot for us down
Right.
in Florida. So we actually still own a cabin up in Minnesota. So we'll go up to Minnesota for July and August, and then probably come back sometime in September. And then the boating group is planning another a northbound trip. And I led that trip last year. I suspect that I'll lead it again this year. And so instead of going south down to Key West, we went north up to the Tampa area.
Oh, nice.
And had again a large flotilla. I think there were 9 boats, about half sailboats, half motorboats, and made several stops along the way. And I think that was about a 14-day trip up and back. So
Yeah. Tampa is very nice. My son and his wife and I chartered a boat in Tampa for a week. And this was 7-8 years ago. It was very nice. I really enjoyed a lot of places to stop, a lot of places to visit. And it was quite exciting. Well, Mark, thanks again. It sounds like your Tampa trip, probably a year from now, we'll have another podcast episode, and it'll be another great story, I'm sure.
Sounds like a good plan.
Okay, thanks again, Mark. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Bea.
Well, yeah, Bela, 5 times is the charm, as the saying doesn't go. And yeah, Mark is just such a great guest, and this was an especially great story. What were your major takeaways?
Yeah, it was really good. I really enjoyed my conversation. So a couple of points that I thought were really informative. Number one, and you brought this up, is the history. I didn't know all that stuff went on. And as I commented during my conversation with Mark, whenever I see these things that were built 100, 150 years ago, and I think about this island, that's 80 miles from any other piece of land, and they had to put every brick in those buildings that they built on a boat and ship them out to this island, everything. And they had no water there. So, I mean, I look at those things and I'm often just so amazed at what humans have been able to accomplish and how easy we have it today compared to how things were, 50, 75, 100, 200 years ago. It's just astonishing to me. The other point I'll make is the buddy boating or a flotilla. I just think this is a great idea. When you're sailing and you're in a group with other folks, I think it's really good. First of all, you have instant friends whenever you stop, and you have support along the way and at the destination. So if something goes wrong, if your engine stops working, you have people you can call. And chances are, if you're with 2 or 3 or 4 other boaters, somebody's going to have the parts that you need. It's just remarkable. I've experienced this myself on a few occasions. My only word of caution, as I brought this up with Mark, is don't get talked into doing something you're not comfortable doing. Sometimes this notion of groupthink gets into play. Like, okay, the weather doesn't look great. Should we leave or should we not leave? And there's sort of this, it's not going to be that bad. We can go, and people kind of get along. So just figure out what you're comfortable doing and stick to it. Those were my sort of big points in the conversation. How about you, Mike? What did you get out of it?
Well, Bela, I gotta admit that I have never heard the term docktails, and I really like that. So that was fantastic. Agree with you on the history. That was amazing to me. And one of the things that I think is cool is that there's lots of pieces of history in the US that are either only accessible by boat, or you can see lots of things that you wouldn't normally see by boat. And I think this is a cool example that I'm quite sure experienced sailors all have have had lots of opportunities to do this. But if you're a new sailor, this is one area where you can really, I think, get a lot out of your sailing experiences, is by exploring some of these places. And I know we've talked about this on earlier episodes, where you can really see some cool historic stuff from it, either only by boat or from a really unique vantage point by boat. So that really struck me as well. And again, the photos and the descriptions that Mark went through were just fascinating to me. And not to repeat, but really to build on what you said about sailing in a flotilla or a group. Agreed, great concept. But I think for less experienced sailors, kind of where I fall into, this is probably something that you might want to consider if you can connect up with a group, right? Where they might have maybe a little more experience than you do, might push your boundaries a little bit, right? Go a little faster than you're used to going, but you also have this built-in support like you talked about. So I think that was a cool point. And again, the maps and photos, this was kind of an experiment for us, right? To have these visuals as part of the podcast. But we'll give our email address at the end like we always do. But if you hated this, if it made it so bad on the audio only, or if it was like, yeah, this is cool, let us know. Or maybe we do some of these only on the YouTube and not on the audio stream. But I thought that was pretty cool. The visuals really made a great story even better. So those are my thoughts. Anything else to add from your side, Bela?
I just want to emphasize one thing you said, Mike, about certain things are accessible only by boat. The other thing I'll say is you get a totally different perspective when you approach something from the water versus land. And to me, the one that really stands out to me is I've been to Manhattan and New York City lots and lots of times by car. I've driven in, and it's sort of a ho-hum drive. I mean, but now I've been through there or by there 3 times on a sailboat, and it's spectacular. It's the same place, but your perspective is totally different when you approach it from the water. So there are a lot of things that, and I've seen that in other places too, like pulling into Charleston, South Carolina. Annapolis is the same way. So it's just sort of neat that it gives you a totally different appreciation for the places you're going to. So with that, I think it's time to wrap this one up. Mike, what do you think?
Agreed, Bela. Listeners, thanks for joining us for yet another episode, or maybe I should say listeners and viewers, thanks for joining us for another episode. We hope you found our conversation with Mark interesting and thought-provoking, just like we did. To contact us or give us feedback, especially on our little experiment here, feel free to email us at sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com.
And finally, if you enjoyed the podcast, hit that like button on your podcasting app. And as I mentioned before, you can also find the podcast on YouTube. And if you know of someone that would be a good guest for the show, let us know. We'll reach out and we'll see if we can talk them into being a guest. Hope to see you out there soon. So until next time, signing off from upstate New York. Take care.
And from over here in Münster, Germany, thanks to everyone for listening and watching. And thanks for a great interview, Bela. And we'll see everybody next time. Auf Wiedersehen.